Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan discuss the Twins' start to the 2024 Grapefruit League season. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. Spring training is now in full swing. All the players are there, Dan. There's almost no injuries. They're starting to play games. There's lineup notifications on my phone, Dan. I didn't know the joy that an MLB alert on my phone could bring me until this week.
Do you watch spring training baseball?
Yeah. I do. And it's like not as I do in the regular season. If I have the opportunity to have it on, or at least have it on in the background, certainly. And the lineup obviously matters. But I can bet, Dan, a lot of Twins fans are going to tune in on Wednesday when Buxton's supposedly going to be playing in the field for the first time.
That I could possibly watch. But I just can't bring myself to get up for a split squad game against the Marlins or whomever they end up playing in those games. I can't do it. But I will be ready, in a month or so when we have actual baseball games that count.
Well, folks, if you're new to the show, thanks so much for checking us out. If you're returning, thanks as always for your support. Not our typical format. Normally, we have an episode after each Twin series. We got segments we go through. We do this whole Puckett's Picks game where either Dan or myself try and win, but typically the listeners had dominated most recent past. But so in this episode, we're going to touch on a couple of things. We're going to talk about the Joe Pohlad interview with Jason DeRusha, which was just a train wreck, Dan. We're going to talk about so many free agents still unsigned, some issues with MLB pants, and then a couple of roster updates, including the most recent Twins trade that went down this afternoon. But with that, Dan, let's go ahead and jump into this Joe Pohlad interview. I don't know, did you get a chance to listen to this?
I have listened to parts of it, and I read a whole lot about it, David, and it's not uplifting. If you are a Twins fan, casual or full bore, it's really kind of sad when you hear somebody in power saying, you know what, we're actually going to cut payroll heading into and after a great season like this. Doesn't make business sense, David, even let alone baseball sense.
It's quite frustrating. And we touched on this last episode, but this was before Pohlad's interview. And honestly, it would have been better off for him and the organization as a whole had he not done the interview to begin with. First of all, a ton of props to Jason DeRusha, because he went right at him. He didn't start with some fluff questions about, oh, what are you thinking about the season, or how are the kids, that sort of thing. He went, no. Hey, how do you justify cutting payroll for a team that won the division last year and is obviously in a window where they can be successful? And right away, Pohlad's in trouble because he starts by talking about the TV deal. And it needs to be stated, you lied to fans. You lied to fans. You said that fans were going to be able to stream. Instead, you took this one-year deal with Bally. You pocketed the money. You were talking about, he says I was working closely with the MLB. Well, Dan, do you know what Diamondbacks fans get to do this season? $99 you can stream, no blackouts. I could buy a second house if the Twins would have done this, Dan.
It does not make a ton of sense. I suppose you could argue that maybe they want to say, at least with the financial cutting, that teams need to do this, right? They need to let young guys play. And suppose I could see that, but that would be more consistent, right? They're not being consistent right now, and I think that's the issue that you and I have.
Yeah, I mean, there's no justification at this point for not spending on this team and building on the success. And I think that's maybe the part of the interview that irked me the most, is he talked about right-sizing their business model. Well, no, if you want this business to be successful, right now is the time to inject cash flow. And if you're not doing that, what's the point of owning a team, Dan? And I hate this idea of they're taking this wait-and-see approach, and once they get to the trade deadline, they can make a move for an ace starter or, another right-handed bat. You're giving up prospects if you're taking this wait-and-see approach. All that free agents cost you is money, Dan. And I realize it's not my money that I'm spending, but I don't really care at this point. If you're going to own a sports team, you should be doing whatever it takes to win.
I want to build a championship culture.
And he talks about this whole right-sizing the business model, and he says there's other ways to improve the team. Look at the Orioles and look at the Rays. Okay, here's the thing. You're telling me you're not spending money on the roster, but there's other ways that you're finding to improve the team. Okay, the new Dome Dog recipe, Dan, the new Dome Dog recipe, it's not going to be worth the 3 or 4 wins that Pohlad thinks it's worth.
Fans want an ejection. There he goes.
And that was Gardy's gripe.
You started talking about the Dome Dogs, David, and I think that was just a little too far. I think what is strange is we see a guy like Cody Bellinger then sign a deal that was remarkably similar to Correa's deal, right? A 3-year, $80 million deal with opt-outs after years 1 and 2. It's as if the Correa deal was kind of a blueprint for some other teams, I guess, to follow, and that obviously worked out well for the Twins after that saga. But there are other players who are still available as free agents here. Even somebody like Blake Snell, a great pitcher.
Yeah, supposedly his asking price is astronomical, and that's why teams have sort of balked at it. I got into it on Twitter with a couple of guys, and the guy was like, no, he doesn't really help our team. It's like, hold up. If you're going to argue that Blake Snell doesn't help this roster, I don't know how you're going to defend that. I can understand the long-term consequences of like signing a guy to an 8-year deal worth $300 million who knows how long his arm is going to hold up. But at the same time, again, this window is now. You got a young team, you have veteran leadership, all of the pieces are in place, and you're really 1 to 2 pieces away, Dan, from being a true champion contender and not just this dark horse that everyone's going to mention as sort of a tacked add-on here after the Dodgers and the Braves and the Astros and the Yankees.
And I suppose at least they are still in the contender conversation, right? I mean, we've seen them ranked, at least in the top 12 by a lot of places, but you would want to stack up the deck then a little bit more if you're in a position like that. And they don't want to. They want to cut money. And so I guess that's just kind of what it comes with being a Twins fan is you see that. And we're not people, I think, who normally would criticize them for not spending money when there wasn't money that it was a clearly good investment. But I think the way the baseball is now with all of these prove-it deals that guys will have, I think this was a chance that they had to do that, and they did not do it.
It's frustrating because they're only a couple pieces away. And yeah, that's the thing. Exactly what you said. We're not normally upset because we're not asking him to turn into Steve Cohen and turn this payroll into a $300 million saga where every season you're picking up every possible free agent who's worth anything. We're asking for 1 to 2 pieces when this team is actually in a good place to be successful. And so don't tell me that we shouldn't spend money just to spend. I agree. We shouldn't spend money on a bad player, but the guys who are left who we just listed, you're telling me none of those guys can help this team win this season?
Especially after the trade. We'll talk about that a little bit later to get an extra right-handed bat in the outfield. And we still agree that there could be a pitcher here. You got guys who have options to be sent down. And so there definitely were ways to improve. Now, speaking of improvement, David, the pants, David, the see-through pants that are causing such a stir in the Major League Baseball. I wouldn't wear those pants to work. And I'm a guy who wears pants of all kinds of colors, right? But a see-through pant seems problematic to me.
If you had to choose an article of clothing that you were wearing to be see-through, a hat is probably the only one I'm okay with, Dan. But it's shocking. So these Ohtani Dodger pictures come out, and like you can just see his undergarments, for lack of a better term. And I guess it's this new deal with Nike and Fanatics, and I don't quite understand who makes what clothing, but I will say if I order from MLB Shop, the stuff that I get from there, the quality seems pretty good. But when I've ordered from Fanatics, I've legitimately had Twins t-shirts that I've bought that didn't make it through the wash once before they started to peel. And it's like, I don't know who has what role to play here, but all I know is that if Fanatics is coming into play here as under this Nike umbrella, it doesn't shock me that the pants are see-through, Dan.
Like they're gonna have to replace them, aren't they? And send all new pants. That's so expensive. Can you think of all of the pants that Major League Baseball players must have? All the colors. Think of all the jerseys that the Twins have. Like this is a lot of pants.
It's a lot of pants. I don't really know what to say to that, but I guess on top of it, there's a shortage. Like some teams don't even have pants, so they're having to use last year's pants with this year's jerseys. It's a mess. But anyway, obviously the Players Association is upset about this. But speaking of sort of the politics of baseball, a couple of rule changes, not like last season, Dan. Last season we saw some changes that's all we talked about. We had an entire episode last spring training about the rules changes. Just a couple of minor tweaks, I guess I'd say, this season.
Yeah, so a couple changes were made. I suppose the biggest one was that they widened the running lane from home plate to first, and so it's basically grass to grass now, which I suppose is good. Yeah, I don't know. Is this a big deal to you?
I think it's maybe to help umpires with the clarity of calling interference by the runner on his way to first. One of those dribblers that the catcher gets up and tosses the ball. But yeah, I don't really know how much this is going to come into play. I mean, it won't be as earth-shattering as larger bases, I don't think, Dan.
No, and you teased me about bigger bases, but that was a big deal. A couple more.
No, again, we can't. Okay, we're not going to go into this whole thing, but you can't just make it that it was just the bigger bases. There was a pitch clock. There, you can only throw over twice. It's not just bigger bases that led to more stolen bases, Dan.
Are you kidding? Of course it was. Those inches matter. Have you not slidden into second base and been thrown out by just, inches before, David, in your life, and thought, if the bases were just a little bit bigger, I would have been safe?
No, Jen, that's never been an experience that I've had. But so what else do they have here for the rules changes?
So a couple of things. They've reduced the mound visits by 1. So now you can only have 4. I don't like that one. I think that mound visits are not like this sinkhole for time in baseball.
I guess that little MVR box will have a little bit smaller number. Yeah, I don't know about the time save aspect of it. I don't think fans are going to be complaining about baseball time for a long time from now because of the pitch clock. And they did make an adjustment there too, right? I think they dropped when there's a runner on, it goes down to 18 seconds as opposed to 20 between pitches, which again, I think the fans loved it so much last season that I don't know that baseball could do much wrong unless they make a different change to lengthen that time at this point.
Yeah, I actually would rather have they added a couple seconds to that. 18's fast when you got runners on base, and I worry about guys just getting a little more worn down. I mean, I know that, it seems like a minuscule thing to us, but in those big moments, we talked about this last year where players were saying like they wanted a little bit more time. They didn't want less time. And that is the troubling thing to me is like, are they just ignoring what the players say that they want in the effort to shave? I mean, again, 2 seconds? Like, this is not that big of a deal over the course of an entire game. Why are you chuckling at me? This is a big deal.
So me think, why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
I think that in the postseason, it should matter. And I do think there's something to be said about like in the 8th and 9th innings, packing on 5 to 10 seconds onto that pitch clock. I just don't care enough right now because I sort of like that the anticipation was still there. I never once felt that like, okay, I need a second. Like I was on board the whole time, Dan. So I guess I don't really see a big issue.
But it's not for you and me, David. It's not that we need the second. It's that the pitchers need the second. Like we are not the most important people here.
Well... No, and it's sort of funny because I skipped over your whole question about whether the league is even listening to the players. But I think the answer is no, Dan. I mean, I'm not listening, but it's not my job to listen, right? Like all I care about is the product on the field and how it impacts me personally. I don't really care so much about the players. That sounds terrible. That's not true, even a little bit. I want all of the players to have success. I don't like it when players get injured, but I don't think the league listens very well. And I don't mind it, I guess. I hear where you're coming from. I just don't care.
So you are the league, and I am the players.
I am the league in this situation, yes.
I'm coming to you, telling you what I want, and you're saying, oh, sure, yes. And then you do the opposite, right? That's what's happening here.
Yeah. Any other thoughts here on the rules changes?
No, because it's so discouraging because like baseball just does what it wants and it ignores the people.
Quick note here, there's going to be a spring breakout game that's basically the All-Star Futures game, spring training edition, but I think it's Walker Jenkins or Wally Jenkins as Dan likes to call him, and I don't think Brooks Lee is on that list, but Walker Jenkins is, I think, so that'll be fun. I think it's against the Rays in a week or two here.
That's because Brooks Lee's time is now, I believe,
yes.
With this team. He's not the future, he is the present.
You were the chosen one!
I think with this baseball team.
We're going to get to Brooks Lee in a moment. So on other news here, Twins related, Paul Molitor, Dan, is going to fill in the radio booth when Dan Gladden is away. What are your thoughts about this? I mean, just real quick, before I get your thoughts, we have to talk about Paul Molitor got fired by the team from the managerial position. And I don't understand. Literally a week later, he was at spring training with the team helping out Rocco with base running because our guys couldn't figure out what a stop sign is. But so this shocks me that Paul Molitor is still just like in it. It speaks volumes to the Twins organization that they can fire someone and he's still willing to come back in whatever role that they want to give him.
But doesn't it maybe say more about Paul Molitor than it does the Twins organization? Like Paul, always available Paul? Is that who he is?
He's the new Happy Joey, Dan.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I kind of feel bad for Paul Molitor. Like, Paul, like, you don't have to do this, Paul. Like, somebody else. Go to the Brewers. Go to Toronto. Like, surely somebody else wants you, Paul.
I don't know how to say it. Anyway, all of that being said, yeah, he must be a very nice guy. That must be it. But like, your thoughts on him in the booth? I guess I'm curious because we have heard him on the telecast from time to time, and he's done some radio interviews, obviously.
Could he be more different than Dan Gladden? Like, just in temperament? I don't know that Paul Molitor knows how to shout. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen when there's something on the field that Paul Molitor doesn't agree with. Like, I guess he and Baldelli in that way are kind of those. I mean, I don't know that Paul Molitor knows how to shove dirt onto a plate either, right? I think Paul's pretty mild-mannered.
Yeah, you can sort of see it just being dead air for a minute, and then like, well, I don't know about that.
I disagree. Respectfully. Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit of a different temperament. And you know what? Chris Atterbury, too, will be different. I'm curious, does Dan Gladden stick with them? What's that chemistry going to look like long term? And maybe, I don't know. Like, do you think that Gladden is in this for the long haul?
I think that he's on his way out. I think that he's ready to spend time with his family. Calling baseball games, Dan, I got to be honest, that is my dream job, right? Like, if I could do one thing, I would want to be the Twins radio broadcaster. That'd be what I want to do. And so, but I think after you do it for 10, 20 years, you might be about done,
So you've got a note here about the MLB Top 100 and the Twins just having 3 in the MLB Top 100?
Yeah, which isn't a crazy poor number, right? Like 3 out of 100 when you have 30 teams. It's a little lower than you'd like as far as an average is concerned. But I thought it was interesting. MLB did this thing on Twitter where every day they released, another set of 10 to get to the top 100 players in the league. And the 3 Twins players are Lopez, Correa, and Lewis, who was like 96th or something, like just in under the cutoff there. And I wonder, Dan, where would you rank sort of the trio, if you take Lopez out because he's a pitcher, it's a little bit different, of Buxton healthy, Correa healthy, and Lewis healthy? The Twins are really pushing this trio. Like, every social media post is about how these guys are the best of friends and they're leading this team to victory. Like, where would you rank the trio of Buxton, Correa, Lewis as far as trios in the MLB? Like, are they in the top? What would you say?
That's such a hard question. Like, like, there's so many trios out there. I would rather almost rank it in Twins history as trios, but even that's hard because, like, baseball is such a fluid sport with these things. Like, I guess the last trio that I think of with this Twins team would maybe be, the Polanco, Kepler, Sano trio, something like that. Like,
Oof,
I don't.
That's the best you can do, Dan.
well, like, other than the ones that already included, Buxton, I suppose. Like, I guess my memory is just not very good, but to go MLB wide, I think that is really hard, but I would hope that they're, among the top 10 or 15, right? Just given the fact that you've got Buxton, who's been an all-star, Correa's been an all-star and a World Series champion, and then Lewis, who obviously is going to be a Hall of Famer someday. Like, I would hope that's the top 10, but do you have more of a ranking system for here? Because that seems very hard without a very big chart.
Well, there are. I guess if we are talking Twins history, though, the most recent one, I wouldn't go. I think you have to go back further than Kepler, Polanco, Sano.
I didn't say it was a great trio.
That one is going to be an all-timer, Dan. I'm sorry for you to call them a Twins trio.
Well, there are 3 players who play for the Twins at the same time. That makes a trio.
If that's the requirement you're using, Dan. Okay, I'll take Jason Kubel, Delman Young, and Alexi Casilla. Is that a good trio also because they were all 3 players who played for the Twins, Dan?
If it doesn't include Denny Hawking, I don't think it's a great trio. Who would you say, though? Like, what would be the last great trio?
Nick Punto, Carlos Gomez, and Mike Redmond. Is that a good trio also, Dan?
All right, so are you going to talk like Mauer and Morneau and somebody?
Yeah, I think that's the clearest. It's probably Mauer, Morneau, and Kadire. Mauer, Morneau, and Kadire, maybe Mauer,
like Troy
Morneau,
Hunter?
and Span. Hunter, yeah, maybe could be. But they didn't play all that many seasons, those 3 together, I don't think, did they? How many seasons did they have together?
Probably not many, and I think that's the key, is like, we think that this could be a trio over the next, 4 or 5 years that could really
easily
lead this team. I think that's the positive sticking point here. Because think if you had 3 guys like that in peak form, and I don't love the Astros, obviously, but if you think of their guys, right, you think of Altuve, Bregman, and I guess Springer when he was there. Like, great teams have great trios of position players who can carry the heart of a lineup.
Yeah, you kind of left our boy Correa off that list, though, Dan.
He never played for the Astros, David. He was never part of that team, right?
And you'll have to excuse me. They had at least 3 seasons together. It looks like Torrey Hunter and Morneau and Mauer. So
maybe that's the trio. But I think if Twins fans are thinking, they would even go all the way back to the early 90s and the late 80s, right? So they talk about Herbeck and Puckett and Gaetti, I suppose, something like that.
Soul Patrol, all the whole bit, yeah.
So it's fun to think about, right? That's one of the things we love about baseball. You have another note here, and Dan Hayes has been writing about this. Would you extend Royce Lewis now? Would you give him the contract? We hinted at this a little bit last episode.
They did this with Fernando Tatis. Like, they're doing it. I think Jazz Chisholm, there was talk about an early extension for him as well. Teams are trying to sign young talent to super lengthy deals that are pretty high risk, if a guy is burst onto the scene, but are going to be very financially lucrative for the team, assuming that young superstar continues to be a superstar into his prime. And so the question is, would you extend Royce Lewis now? And again, this question is so funny to me because the way that you and Hogs talk about Royce Lewis is like just the best baseball player who has ever walked the earth after he's played 60 games in the major leagues. And he's under team control right now through 2028, which is 1 year less than Buxton and about 30 years less than Correa is under team control. And 2 years less than Dobnik, I think. So the way that all shakes out. But so we have him under team control for quite a while. I guess I'm hesitant, at least at this point, to offer a large extension to the guy. Again, I'm a big Royce Lewis fan. I feel like I constantly have to justify me trying to downplay how good Royce Lewis is by saying that I really like him. I think he is going to be a great asset to this team, and he could be a superstar. But I can't buy in until I see a little bit more data, Dan.
Wow, so much to unpack there. No, I would not extend him yet because he's under team control for so much longer. Like, you don't need to. They don't have to prove their loyalty to Royce Lewis right now. That's not how baseball works. Baseball's loyalty is proved in the back end. When you give guys contracts for 6, 7, 8 years, when you really just want them for 3 or 4, right? But in order to get them, you sign the whole deal. So I don't buy that. The Twins have never been ones to really do that. I mean, so I would say let's wait and see. And if anything, the precedent is there to wait. You don't have to lock him up now and risk alienating him if you don't sign him to this deal. That's just kind of how baseball rolls. But when a guy is up for those big contracts, you kind of got to give him the money.
I think we were all sort of surprised when Buxton signed the extension that he did, because guys talk a big talk about wanting to stay with one team, and really they want to chase the money, or they want to chase championships wherever they think that's going to work out the best for them. So when Buxton truly signed the extension here, and at that point, he was going to be a guy who, if you could extend, you wanted to extend him because he can be so electric when he's healthy. I don't know, does Royce Lewis have that same feeling? Does he want to be a Minnesota Twin for the entirety of his career? Because Buxton's talk was definitely backed up with the way that he walked and the way that he signed that deal. I just don't know that Royce Lewis has that same mindset. I mean, it's the same way, Buxton took the same approach that Joe Mauer did, where this is the team he wanted to play for. And I just don't know that that's in Royce Lewis. And that'll become apparent, obviously, over the next couple of seasons, how attached Royce is to this Twins team. But like you said, these 3 guys are together for a long time, and I think that there's a good chance by the time that run is done, depending on the success that this team has had, maybe Royce won't feel the need to go anywhere else.
I think it's a double-sided piece, right? If fans show how much they love Royce Lewis, I think he's going to feel that love and want to stay. And right now, obviously, people love Royce. He has done nothing to sour fans to him, right? He seems like an upstanding person. He hits grand slams.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good right there.
Right? He gets home runs in playoff games. Like, right now, Royce Lewis can do no wrong, and we'll see. Like, do you think that the fan base would ever sour on Royce Lewis right now?
I would take a lot, Dan. It would take some sort of switch of just lack of production and
like, is he a Packer fan that we don't know about? Like, is there something that he could do that would make Twins fans doubt him?
I think the Packer fan thing is less important to Twins fans, like, because Hogs, obviously the third chair on this show, he's a Packer fan, but he loves the Twins, and so you kind of overlook the Packer thing. It's fun when the Packers lose, though, and then you can tell him about it. But our whole childhood growing up, he would mock me for being a Vikes fan and all that. But there's less hostility in the fan bases between Minnesota and Wisconsin when it comes to baseball. So side point, doesn't matter. No, I think it would take so much right now, and I really think the only thing that's going to keep Royce Lewis from being successful in this league is injuries. And so if he can stay healthy and stay on the field, I don't think there's going to be any love lost between Royce Lewis and this fan base anytime soon.
All right, well, we should move forward here to the big news of the day. The Twins have filled their final roster spot, or so we think, with Manuel Margot. Is that how you say this man's last name, David?
Margot, yeah. I listened to it a few times, and I'm sure we heard it. I'm sure we watched the Rays postseason games last season, but we traded away Noah Miller, the number 26 prospect, according to Aaron Gleeman. It's a shortstop. We traded him to the Dodgers for Manny Margot and Rain Duncan, a third base prospect in low A, I think. And Dan, here's the kicker. The Pohlads were interested because they got $6 million cash back from this deal also.
I mean, I look at this guy's stats, and I know that he's been around for a number of years, but I'm like, meh. Is this all we got? And this is the part of me where it's like, I'm probably doing exactly what the Pohlads think the Twins fans do, is that you sign somebody and then you complain about it anyway. But I would say, is he any better than just Trevor Larnach? Maybe. I guess he's a righty, so at least there's that. But there's got to be somebody in the system who is cheaper and younger and fresher and maybe better?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the question really becomes, would you have rather had Adam Duvall? Would you have rather had Michael Taylor? And I don't really know. I don't know. Maybe this guy will turn out to be just the perfect piece that was missing for the Twins. But in all honesty, I think when the Twins made the move for Michael Taylor, a big part of that was because Buxton was so uncertain whether he was going to play in the field. And so that move proved to be pivotal to the Twins' success last season. This season, Buxton is slated to play in center field. So this guy, Margot, he might not get a ton of playing time if Buxton is really as healthy and as able to stay on the field as it seems like everybody says he's going to be able to do.
And that's reasonable. And we've read, I believe, on The Athletic as well, that, Michael Taylor probably wanted to play more, right? Which I guess in a weird way, it's kind of a good sign that he didn't sign with them, because it seems like then the Twins really do have faith that Buxton's going to play center. I also look at, to counter my own argument, I don't see a lot of great outfield prospects right now who are right-handed hitters, and so they clearly think that they need somebody out there to be able to be that guy. I don't know. I'm not inspired, and I want to be inspired by a signing, and there's no inspiration here.
Would there have been an outfielder right now who they could sign that you would be inspired from?
Well, I think that's the thing. No. So maybe this is all we get, and who knows? Maybe he's going to be a great impact player. I mean, look what the Twins did with their late signings last year, right? Taylor, Solano, who was great, Willie Castro was a camp invite, and we were saying in July last year, those might be their three best players. So maybe they know something that we don't. I would hope that they do, since they're paid, to know more than we do.
Well, yeah, it should be noted, Correa came out towing the company line, talking about payroll and how he's got faith in the guys and the payroll doesn't really matter. But I guess it was kind of funny because he hit a foul ball that almost hit Dave St. Peter, and so people thought it was him being mad about the payroll, which would just be all sorts of hilarious if that was the case. But so Correa was like, hey, I don't really pay attention to the finances. That's the front office job. I'm just here to play, and I have a lot of confidence in this team. I mean, what else is he going to say, right? It wouldn't look good for him to come out and be like, they need to increase the payroll when he's the highest paid guy on the roster by, I don't know, a couple $100 million. But so the question I have, Dan, this roster, there weren't a lot of battles coming into camp to begin with. Maybe a couple of the bullpen spots, but really some guys have minor league options and some don't. So that seems to sort of answer that question without us really needing to ask it. But the question was really the fourth bench spot. And clearly you wouldn't make this trade unless you're planning for this guy to be on the roster. Is the roster set, Dan? Are there any other moves that are going to be made?
I don't think so. I just don't see space for it. I mean, right now we've got as bench locks Farmer, Castro, Vasquez, and Margot, and you need all those guys. It's mostly righties, by the way, which is valuable. So I don't think that they do. I really do think that this is it. Unless, I've been touting Nico Goodrum and his flexibility, but I think that this signing kind of negates his chance of making the team, unless somebody gets hurt, right? And that's always a possibility, unfortunately.
Would you have rather had Hernandez? He was sort of floated as a potential suitor.
Kike Hernandez? Yeah, because of his playoff experience and such, and, being kind of a clubhouse guy. I think I would have rather had him, but he chose to re-sign with the Dodgers.
Well, I think this move sort of facilitated that for him. So then a couple of quick roster questions here, and then we have one more big topic to get to, Dan, that I'm very excited to talk about. But so who is more likely to make an impact this season in the mind of Dan Thompson? Jose Miranda.
I am not throwing away my shot.
Trevor Larnach, or your guy, Brooks Lee.
About this time last year, David, I was touting Eddie Julian as kind of being the Jose Miranda of that year after, anyway, something like that. So I'm going to go with Brooks Lee.
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
I just think that he's ready and that he's going to be the spark on a team that doesn't want to spend a lot of money on payroll. I don't know whose spot he's going to take. Maybe somebody's going to get hurt, but I think we're going to see a lot of Brooks Lee this season.
He's doing everything in his power to force the team to put him on the roster. There was a good article again. I think it was Dan Hayes at The Athletic wrote about all the work that Lee does with his dad and how he's really put a ton of time and effort into his right-handed swing. And it's just cool when you read about that father-son relationship. And obviously this is a kid who has been built for success at the major league level, Dan.
Well, let's hope so, David, because they're counting on the young guys here. Other than that, I mean, I think, like you said, the roster is pretty set, which kind of takes away a lot of the drama here, I guess, for the rest of the spring.
Yeah, assuming no injuries, I think that this is going to be the roster that we see. The only real question is the bullpen. One other quick note here, Dan. Paddock's nickname, I guess, is the sheriff. I have a real hard time saying that word, Dan. It's a very difficult word for me, so I'm going to stick with Paddock because I hate that word so much.
Sheriff is how I think the rest of us say it, but I'm not going to make you say it. Deputy. You can just say deputy or something like that. We'll pick a different term.
Bob Marley would disagree, I think. You can't say deputy in place.
Well, okay. So now this is the thing we've been wanting to talk about, David. Twins players are apparently board game players, but I have some caveats here with this. And so first off, they play Settlers of Catan. Is that a board game now that like is considered like where would that fit? Because to me, it's a gateway game. And this is why Doe Park is, I think, clearly a gamer, because the way that he talked about it, he used in terms like that, like gateway games. He praised Azul, which is obviously a better game, but you can also buy it at Target now. Like, so I don't know if can we call Twins players like gamers here or board gamers if they play Catan?
So I don't really love to gatekeep this hobby. A couple of notes here, folks.
That's what I'm doing right now, and I shouldn't be. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be doing it. It's not like a snob.
No, that's fine. So, folks, behind me, you'll notice if there's things that I love outside of my family and my faith and other things that are very important in my life, baseball and board games are the things that are, we'll say, non-relational in my life that I love the most. And behind me is my board game collection. I have an ever-expanding collection. I love board games so much. So when this article fell from the heavens, Dan, I about died. I almost fell out of my chair because nothing excited me more than the thought that in the clubhouse of the Twins baseball team, there are just calyx shelves filled with board games. I know that's not what's actually happening here, but it would be very exciting for me if that was the case. But Catan, as those of us of German ancestry would call it, Dan. Settlers, I would say, is the hobby game that you would be most likely to find someone who knew what it was, who isn't into hobby strategy board games. So it's not quite Monopoly level fame, but like it's borderline. Like a lot of people, if they've ever played a board game, it's probably either Monopoly, Sorry, Parcheesi, or Catan. Like those are your options, really. Catan is a gateway game, a game that I have played a ton of. My family, we would sit down and we'd play it like 3 times in a row growing up, from like my age, like 10 to age 15. That's just what we did as a family. We played Catan and Ticket to Ride and Carcassonne and Lost Cities. But anyway, I love this so much. And I guess Matt Canarino is the guy. He's a pitcher in Double-A who just is coming back off Tommy John surgery. He's the guy who's sort of the pusher of the board games. Pusher is probably not a great word for it, but that's people who are in the hobby like to get other people into the hobby so they have players to play with. So I definitely understand what Matt Canarino is doing here. I sent him a DM, Dan, and I realized I probably came across as a crazy person, but I told him, I said, hey man, once you get to the majors, if you're looking to play some games, I have a ton of games. I'm about 10 minutes from the stadium. I would love to host you and any other Twins players who want to come. And I always tell people this. I don't like to oh, David, you're so good at things. I would say I'm a very good board game teacher, and I don't win a lot of board games. So I'm like the perfect competitor. If you want to learn a new board game, I would love to teach it to you. I love teaching it almost as much as I love playing it. That still stands. If there's a Twins player listening to this podcast who wants to learn any board game, my collection is vast. Please reach out. I would love to teach you board games.
Oh, man, David. I mean, that was your moment, right? You got to marry the two things, which, by the way, you said that it's not relational. you are all about relationship with baseball and with board games as well, right? It's about the people as much as anything.
That's true.
This makes Florida and spring training just seem even more fun, right? That like, not only are you playing baseball, you're playing board games. Like, David, you would just fit in. So this is your holiday right here. This is how you would love to spend the rest of your life.
If I could go on a Twins road trip and follow the team and then at night go to my hotel and just play board games, Dan, oh, my goodness. That is the dream right there, my friend. And actually, if I could do it via train, like between cities, so I could play games on the train as I was traveling, it'd be the best. It'd be the absolute best. You know, Dan, I've tried pretty hard on the podcast overall to not talk much about board games and try and keep us really in the lane of Twins baseball. But so to have this outlet, thank you, fans, for letting me indulge a little bit. This probably wouldn't have come up during the regular season because we try and stick pretty closely to baseball. But just know if you're a listener of the show and you like board games and the Twins, you are not alone. You are in great company, I would say, Dan Thompson.
Well, David, I think it's about time for us to wrap up here and look forward to more baseball-centric topics here as it comes up. We're almost to March, which means we are only about 4 weeks from the baseball season starting, and I'm pretty dang excited about that. If it's all right, how about you send us out?
I'd love to, Dan. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Min for the Win and find our Min for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you're following us on Instagram and you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you get a couple of rewards, maybe a shout out on the show. You can find us on Patreon. We'd really appreciate a few more folks on there to help keep this production moving. We can maybe upgrade some equipment, maybe put a little bit more time into an editor, a producer, maybe even, Dan. It could happen. But anyway, thanks for listening. And as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Min for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.